our personal humanity to reconnect with our shared humanity. I am literally so excited that I'm vibrating that we're about to talk to Tammy Klatz, 3-time CSO in the manufacturing industry and author of the new book, Leading with Empathy, which is so powerful and you absolutely need to go on Amazon and get it. Tammy, welcome to Hidden Human. Thank you so much for coming. And I love having you here. I'm just thrilled.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for the opportunity. I'm thrilled to be here and look forward to our conversation today.
Can we start with just kind of setting some context? So if I were a 6-year-old child and you were to explain to me in a way I could understand what a CISO actually is and does, how would you explain it to me?
That's a great question. So, because it's part of my job is really being able to tell a story. So the audience is really around, how the story needs to be tuned. So from a 6-year-old child's perspective, what I would tell them is that my job is to protect um, my company and the people who work in my company from all of the bad stuff that happens on the internet and in the world of computers.
What was in your soul that drew you to that line of work? Because that's very specific, and I'm just wondering, what was it inside you that said, Tammy, that's the way we're gonna go?
Yeah, it's interesting. So if you would have asked me, 10, 20, 30 years ago, I wouldn't have said that this was where I was going to end up. My goal and my dream was that I was going to be a math teacher, right? And I spent some time in corporate America, 24 years in IT specifically. And then I had an opportunity presented to me to move on to a new company and represent and stand up their overall cybersecurity program. And the interesting thing is I kind of paused and I questioned the individual who was recruiting me, saying, "You really want me in this job?" And the answer to that question was yes, absolutely. And the reason was because I knew the business, I had the right relationships with the leadership team, and I understood a controls mentality and the need to protect an organization. So anything else was teachable, right? And being a constant learner and actually wanting people to learn from me is another opportunity, right? So this was I guess the launch pad, if you will, into my cybersecurity career. That started in 2016 and has continued since. And the probably the biggest point of satisfaction for me is when I get to see individuals actually latch on or begin to understand what some of the risks are. And they go, "Oh, I get it." Right. And then also helping them being able to translate what we tell them at work to how it relates to them in their personal life and how they can protect themselves and how they can protect their families as well. So it's not just about corporate America; it's about them as an individual as well.
Yeah, and as I was listening to you, Tammy and I, to full transparency, have known each other for almost 3 years, and I know her as just a light in the universe. She's extremely positive. But you spend your day in a world of cybersecurity, right? Which is a constant shapeshifter, and there's some scary things that people are doing out there. So, as a leader in your organization and of your life, how do you manage the fear of what's coming at you through cybersecurity and not translate that fear to your people?
The first advice I give to everybody is to stay calm, most importantly, and very much stay focused on the facts. When there is bad stuff going on in the environment, or actually, in the media, in the world, it's very easy to overreact from an emotional perspective. It is also very easy to want to make swift decisions without actually having all of the details or all of the facts. And you also are getting pressure from internal, stakeholders who want to know what's happening, right? And are pressing and pressing because they want the answer and they want it to be fixed and they want it to be fixed quickly. So my advice is really just to pause and breathe, and make sure that as you're relaying the situation and laying it out so people truly understand what we know and be transparent about what we don't know at this point in time and what we're doing about it. And I think the other thing that becomes extremely important is being able to protect your team, who is actually going through the triage activities, the recovery activities, even just some investigation type activities, right? Because you don't want them drawn into the having to give updates to everybody. So I become the buffer in that situation, that is protecting my team and feeding the communications as needed to the appropriate stakeholder groups, whether that's internal executives, whether that is media, whether that is law enforcement, depending upon what the situation is.
Sure. In your career, can you share a pivotal moment that shaped your leadership?
I can. So the question is which one to choose, right?
Well, how about this?
Um,
Because this is what I was thinking about when I was listening to you, and I was like, because I know you, and I've never known you to be fearful, like, or scared. Um, but I was wondering, like, was there ever a moment in your roles as CISO where you were scared? Like, because you listen, I'll be very transparent. I was scammed out of $2,500 like 3 years ago. And it was one of those secret shopping scams right around the holidays. And that was a lot of money for us. And when I went to the police, they were like, yeah, you're never getting this back. They probably already, and to me, it's like completely out of control. How do you manage that?
yeah. So from a CISO perspective, in particular, I think there's been a couple of incidents that I've had to um, lead the team through and manage the communications thereof. And I think it's the fear of the unknown, right? And really trying to stay ahead of what is happening, and being able to be, I guess, factual and truthful is extremely important, right? And being okay with saying I don't know is much better than making something up to pretend that you do know, right? So that genuine, authentic piece of, being factual, it allows that trust relationship to actually build, so that when you're in a crisis situation, people aren't questioning you as an individual, your judgment, your decisions, because they know that from prior experience that you've actually demonstrated that you do know what you're doing in those situations, right? So from a pivotal moment and being quote afraid of what's happening, in the middle of an incident, when there's money, similar to what you described, Kelly, where an individual within an organization has been tricked to change bank account information and it wasn't properly verified, and the fact that the money has now been sent to the wrong bank. The question of, are we going to get that money back? How's that going to work, right? And the potential financial impact to the organization. Sometimes it's only $2,500. Sometimes it can be $25 million. That's a much different um, fear factor, if you will, right? And there's a lot of stories now in the media with regards to deep fakes and people pretending to be people that they're not and getting people to do things. And how you instill in individuals how you verify, right? The whole trust but verify brings on a whole new dimension now, right? But it looks and sounds like that person, right? So it's beyond, oh, I got a text to do this from the CIO, which is like, yeah, well, that wouldn't happen anyway, right? Now it sounds like the CEO. It looks like the CEO. So sure, let me do this, right? So that education and awareness becomes extremely important.
Yeah, well, and the trust factor. I mean, that I remember during the pandemic getting calls from the C-suite, like members of the C-suite saying, "What do we tell our people?" And I said, "The truth." And they were like, "Well, how can we do that?" And I said, "You need to be honest, transparent, and truthful up into the point of liability or violating HIPAA. You're not going to violate HIPAA, right?" And they're like, "But we're the leaders." And I said, "But the thing is, if you say, here's what we know and here's what we don't know, you're going to bond in that ambiguity. If you make something up, we all know that you're lying because there are so many tells." So I agree with you. I mean, I think it's so important in cyber and everywhere else. So, Talk to me about your leadership style. How would you describe it and how has it evolved over time?
So my leadership style is I actually base it with my team when I'm onboarding any team, right? So transparent is at the top of the list, right? Accountable is also that you've got to own what is going on in your space and not be pushing that off to somebody else, blaming somebody else, anything like that. Motivational is the other key thing because you have to surround yourself with good people, and that is what's going to allow you and your organization to shine. And there's something to be said for there's no I in team, right? And I'm very much an individual who will uh, give credit where credit is actually due, making sure there's shout outs to the appropriate team members for things that they've accomplished or I've received positive feedback on. So making them, feel good is extremely important. I think the other thing that's extremely important, specifically in my space, in the cybersecurity space, is oftentimes the security organization can be viewed as the office of no and oh, right? No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. And then what becomes um, what is perceived as a result of that is that we're a barrier or a blocker from getting everything done or anything done. So what I try to do is I change the phrase and change that around to, the office of yes, but let's have a conversation and let's figure out with regards to what I need to accomplish in order to keep the company safe and secure and what you're trying to accomplish from a new business initiative, some new activities, whether that's AI, because that's all over everybody's, mind right now, because there can be a common ground, and it's that balance of what's the right level of security that will allow innovation and productivity to thrive, and not being a barrier to moving things forward.
Yeah. And how did your book Leading from Empathy or Leading with Empathy, excuse me, which is on Amazon, go get it now. Um or review it, please, cuz Tammy and I are self-published authors and we're up against the Amazon monster, so every little bit of support helps. But how did that come to be? Did that evolve over time? To just one day you were sitting, I don't know, Tammy takes these fabulous trips, floating in the Caribbean Sea, and you're like, ta-da! This book came into my mind.
So I've always wanted to write a book. It's been on my bucket list for quite some time. And in between my last two CISO opportunities, I took a break. I took a mental health break, to be perfectly honest with you, and had off for a period of 6 months. And it was at that time that I actually, was kind of noodling around the idea again. But I actually got, the innocuous prompts and pokes on LinkedIn to say, "Hey, have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I'm not working now. Maybe this is a really good time to explore this, right?" So I seized the opportunity. I did my research. I identified a company that I wanted to work with to get the book done, and then, made it happen, right? And it was one of those things I didn't want it to take 2 years. I wanted it to be a very defined and succinct amount of time to actually get it done. And hence why I went down the path that I did. And I started the book in August and finished it it got published on April 1st. But I think one of the things that was extremely beneficial is I wanted the book to be authentic. So I've said that word a couple of times, right? And I didn't want it just to be about me talking to, the angel writer who was helping me scribe the book, etc. So I asked her if she would reach out to people that I've worked with, people who have coached me, people that have worked for me, or people I've worked for to validate and really understand what the experiences were and why their experience with me was different than some things that they may have experienced otherwise. Because in order for she and I to work together in partnership, she needed to get me right and understand me. I mean, the only way she was going to get that was by talking to the other people that I've surrounded or been surrounded by throughout my career. And that spanned, individuals throughout my 30 years of my career, right? People from the very beginning who were very influential to people I had just finished working with and leading as part of my last team before I left. Leading with empathy and grace is really like my testament, if you will. It's really about having a conversation. It's like this, Kelly, like me and you talking, right? It's not a hardcore instructional book. It's really about experience sharing, what's worked for me, and maybe it will be able to help somebody else going forward.
For me, it felt like a love letter.
Boom.
Like, that's what it
Interesting.
felt like to me. A love letter to the path that brought you to that moment. And, for me, it felt like, writing books, it's just like taking information, putting it on the page, but it also is this living, breathing thing that is really part of our legacy, and I was the same way. People ask me, why did I self-publish? And one was because I wanted to have a creative control, but also because I wanted to get my book out the way you did, rather than waiting 2 years and hoping a publisher picked it up. But I love it, and it's just such a great piece of work, and I'm so glad it's out in the world, and thank you for that. In terms of challenging leadership situations, what's the most challenging leadership situation you've had in your career or in life, and how did you navigate it?
So I would say the most challenging leadership experience that I've had was really around uh, being thrown into an organization where the knowledge of the space, whether it was IT, whether it was security, was not fully understood by the individual leading the organization, right? So it was a constant battle, and I'm all about like being able to teach people, right? But when you have somebody who is to be leading the organization, but really hasn't taken a vested interest in learning about what organization they're now leading, that becomes a struggle. And I think, partnered with that was really around being told, organizationally that, it's okay to take risks. And then when I did take a risk and made some decisions, there was some negative fallout as a result of that, which ultimately led to the reason that I left my last company, right? And I felt very um, uh, dishonored, I guess is a good way to describe it, because it was really there was I'll call it one mistake. I'm not sure it really truly was a mistake, but that led to some questions of credibility, which was extremely disappointing to me, and not the type of company that I know I wanted to be associated with. So it was really one of those things where, do I quit? Well, that am I, or do I, follow this through and prove something? And at the end, it really was a very taxing and somewhat toxic environment that just wasn't good for me. And I had to make a personal decision to leave. And that is what led to my 6-month break. Because honestly, if I would have went someplace immediately after that, that probably would have carried with me, and I would not have been as near successful as I've been when I started my current position just a few months ago.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And for me, and I think we've talked about this before, when there are decisions to make where it's like, do I stay and prove a point, or do I leave? The question I always like to put it through, is this decision on the company's behalf, like the leadership's behalf, bad business decision, or is it against my moral compass? Because if it's going against my moral compass, I'm out. Like, there's literally no question. But if it's a bad business decision, depending on whether it's immoral, unethical, illegal, doing harm to themselves or others, if it's not doing any of those things, then maybe we can navigate it. We're talking about empathy, compassion, accountability. I just read in Harvard Business Review that the next generation of leaders you can't learn in a textbook. The quality you need is adaptability. So some of these things are hard to measure. So how would you know? Like, how do you measure success, and how do you know they're there, especially from leadership perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the thing that this resonates in the book as well, right? Because one of the things that I comment on is the 25 qualities of a successful leader, right? And I honestly can't sit here and rattle all 25 of them off to you at this moment, but the thing that's important is that authenticity, right? That you demonstrate, and you're right, it can't be measured, and so often it is, referred to as the soft skills, which I have a little bit of issue with
Yeah, I
that
take issue with that too.
description, right? But it's around the strong skills that are required for you to prevail. And there's a quote by Maya Angelou that is also in the book as well, and it's, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they're never going to forget how you made them feel. And, as an empathetic person, and even my Myers Briggs is very high on the scale. So from that perspective, it is about that. And that's what resonates throughout the book and some of the stories that are shared. It's how I made them feel during our time together, right? So I can't measure that quantitatively. I can measure it qualitatively based on the accolades and the things that come back to me years later to recognize, I'm never going to forget when you did what. So that works for me as a person from a validation perspective. It's not necessarily going to pass the muster as like a smart goal, like to do this, because there's no quantifiable component to it. But if your team's successful and your team is meeting their goals and they're happy while they're doing it, that in itself can be, a measurement of the success of the style of the leader of the organization.
Yeah, I agree. And as I was listening to you and knowing your history, I was like, oh, you can measure it in the level of attrition in her department. You can measure it in mining conflict, being able to debate issues that illuminate risks possibly in the future. Is communication clear? How's the morale? Like all of those translate into, I don't like to call them soft skills either. I think they're crucial skills. And if anybody knows millennials, Gen Zs, and the alpha generation, those are skills they will demand you have. It is literally a non-negotiable. And I love that so much. But
And I think that's an interesting shift, Kelly, right? Because the demand versus the holy crap, what is she doing? Right? It's like it's day and night from an expectations perspective. It's, somewhat perceived as very odd and unusual with the I'll call it the older workforce, if you will. But the younger the generations that you spoke of, it is expected, right? But that has to be a very delicate balance as well, because expected should not lead to entitlement either, right? So if it's deserved, right, and if it's earned, then fine. But otherwise, it's not just given, if you will. So
yeah, and I love that you brought up entitlement because, there and I love them to bits. This is not a judgment, but there are some kids coming out of college and I'm like, yeah, you're not entitled to anything. Like the world, and the sooner you learn that, the easier it's going to be, right? Because, I mean, with this multi-generational workforce, I mean, boomers, Xers, and now the older millennials, I mean, there are certain things that, if you like, for instance, if you're on the partner track in a law firm there and you get the opportunity to be on a big case, you're going to have to stay after 5 o'clock some days just to, you know what I mean? That's just going to have to happen and it'll balance out later because you need to
you
advocate.
it comes out in the wash. It comes out in the wash. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But there is that expectation for some that, I'm gonna work my defined hours, right? And it's like defined hours, what are those, right? And it drives me a bit crazy when I run into those situations, right? Because certainly, given where I am in my career and I've been able to flex as needed to do what I need to do to get things done. But I've kind of maintained that through my entire career because as a single mom, I had to make choices that maybe were not the most popular from a professional perspective, but my kids were my most important priority. And I made sure, that I was there for them and had to explain that in a couple of cases. And it became a question of, am I getting my job done? And does it matter when I'm getting my job done? And that was actually a pivotal point with me and another one of my leaders throughout my career. So I think that story might be in the book as well. But yeah, and the other thing that I'll say is from a team development perspective. We talked about different demands in different industries. I think the other thing that comes into play is sometimes it's a lot harder to facilitate like a global team. Like right now, my team is spread around the world, right? So getting together as a team and going for happy hour or doing an activity or something like that is really not an option without people feeling excluded because, some folks are in the Netherlands, some folks are in Ireland, and some folks are in the States. So it's difficult, right? So we just implemented a couple weeks ago something called Friday Fun, and literally, we schedule a half hour on the calendars, no business discussion at all. And it's really about, what are you doing this weekend? What trips are you going to planning? And it's just to build the camaraderie. And the first week we did it, I remember like being so genuinely happy at the end of that call because everybody came together, right? And it was a very, I think, pivotal moment in our team's development as well.
That's amazing. And I'll give you a step further because, of course, coaching mode. I've seen people do experience boxes. So you could do a coffee tasting, do a whiskey tasting, whatever, to really kind of bring you all together and have that tactile, kinesthetic part of the experience. But of course you do that. Of course you do. So you brought up Maya Angelou earlier, and I love that quote. Who are some of the leaders that inspired and positively impacted you and maybe have shifted your mindset?
There's those that have been my leaders as part of my career, right? And then there are some that are more publicly recognized. And so from a public perspective, I guess, and others that people will be able to relate to are, I love Simon Sinek, I love Brene Brown, and all of the leadership messages that they have to share as from a people development organizational perspective motivation. I've also been blessed throughout my career with three exceptional coaches over the years who have helped me, and we're all part of the book development, including yourself, Kelly. And those individuals are a safe place, right? It's not somebody within your current leadership team. It's a non-biased individual. And I did a panel discussion last week at Secure World, and we talked about, who's on your personal board of directors, and when do you call on those individuals, and how frequently do you have to rotate those individuals? Is it the same set of people your entire career? No, because your career changes, your trajectory changes, your goals change. So I've had the fortune to have you and Barry and Jill help me throughout my career, and then additionally, the leaders that stand out for me is a gentleman I worked for at Air Products, actually, who is on the referenced on the back of the book, and it's really about he said to me, and this was probably, gosh, 2020, no, before my kids were born, so like 20 years ago, right? And he said to me, Tammy, he's like, I want you to I want you to teach people to lead like you do. And I was like, what? And I said, it's just who I am, right? And you want me to teach somebody? I said, I can only do that by demonstration, right? And that is, that is probably the biggest inspiration for the book, actually. And that's why it's quoted on the back cover of the book, actually, as well. So he was definitely very influential. I had another boss who was also involved in the book as well, and the question, there was a situation where I was, looking at changing jobs within the company, but he had me pause, and basically he looked at me and he said, "Tammy, what are you running away from?" He said, "Are you running away from something, or are you running towards something?" And that was, a very pivotal question as well, that really made me pause and think about what I was doing, why I was doing it. And those are the lessons that resonate with you. Another individual who's a dear friend of mine, her coaching or question to me was, it's not about the position you're taking next, it's about the one after that. And is this setting you up for success for that position as well? So, those are the little nuggets that you take away from the people who have influenced your life to be able to instill on others, and continue to remind yourself as you go through your own development in your career.
Yeah, and I want to kind of dovetail off of that. Tammy, you said something really pivotal, like I'm just being me, right? And but I think about your daughters who are amazing individuals, but and I was thinking kids learn what you show them. And that's why you've gotten so many results with our work together, is that you don't just speak it, you embody and enact it, right? And it's kind of like when people ask me to teach them about executive presence, I'm like, okay, so let's dig deep, shall we? Because it's an energy. It's the essence, it's your loving essence coming out and leading the way. I mean, how many people in our world now will be like, yeah, yeah, we're all about diversity, equity, inclusion. And then you hear about people in underrepresented communities within that organization that are being treated badly. But yet, at Pride, there's rainbows on their social media during Black History. It's there's a cognitive dissonance in that. And I think that's what makes you such a powerful leader, is because what you say and what you do are in such alignment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That
You're welcome.
that that means a lot to me, and I can tell you, in some recent circumstances, which we'll talk about separately, Kelly. But some of the comments that I recently received is like, you just give off such positive vibes, right? And that's that executive presence that you're referring to. And I can't say that I'm like consciously doing it, right? Again, it goes back to embodying what's my value system, what's most important to me, and not compromising who I am, and having people recognize that, right? So it makes it a lot easier in those situations.
It is. I mean, my grandfather used to say, don't ever lie, because the truth is easier to remember. And he's right. And as I've gotten older, the memory is the first thing to go. So I'm like, I can't lie because I don't I don't remember anything but the truth. But going back to what you were saying about the energy you give off, I mean, we've talked about this before, but it's who you're being guiding what you're doing. Like, okay, you want to be a powerful leader. What does that look like in a celebration? What does that look like in crisis? What does that look like in daily life? Who do you need to be to guide and mold that situation? And you're just a shining example of that. And that commitment of non-negotiables to you, because when you it's it, okay, how can I say this? When you compromise your integrity, it's like you're chipping off part of yourself, you're betraying yourself, because you've
Well,
made those promises to yourself. So
and it's exhausting.
it is exhausting, and then the cognitive acrobatics you have to go through to kind of twist yourself into what people or society are expecting, which is nobody's ever going to nobody's all going to always be happy, so
Mhm.
do what you want, because there are going to be angry people out there anyway. So Within reason. I don't mean do what you want. Let me just make a caveat because I can just hear somebody saying, Kelly Mirabot said, do what you want. So, are you ready for some rapid fire questions? And then we'll tell everybody how to reach out to you.
Sure, absolutely. Go for it.
Okay. Tammy was a little angry that I didn't give her the questions
Not
before.
angry, not
No,
angry.
like,
That's a rough word. I don't get angry,
no,
not
she
usually.
doesn't. She doesn't. Let's just say she didn't like it. There was a little discomfort going on,
Yes,
but that's
yes,
okay.
that's okay.
All right. So, what's your favorite comfort food?
Oh, my favorite comfort food is probably, soft vanilla ice cream with sprinkles.
Ooh, colored or brown
Oh,
sprinkles? Rainbow
rainbow sprinkles.
sprinkles. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And pizza.
Okay. And pizza. Okay.
Yeah.
Plain pizza or
Yes, absolutely.
okay.
Yes,
Is there a
pizzeria,
favorite place
hot.
where you live that you get your pizza?
There's a go-to place, I would say, but there's not like, "Oh my gosh, I gotta have it from there," type pizza, so, yeah.
There's this place in Manayunk, and if my husband was here, he'd be able to tell us, but they make like 40 pizzas and they do like this pepperoni with hot honey that
Oh,
is
mm.
just, I cannot come into,
Well, maybe our next lunch date will have to be in Manny Kelly.
sure, but it cannot come into this house because it's like huge. And I,
Oh.
I find myself walking by and like thinking I'm only gonna get a little piece and then half of it's gone. So no, it does not belong in this
Can't
house.
happen, can't happen.
Okay, what books are on your nightstand right now? Of
Oh, well, mine, first of all, so
course.
Leading with Empathy and Grace. I actually have a motivational book. Uh, oh goodness, I'm not going to remember the name of it right now, which is terrible. But I have another one that is Jesus is Calling. That is on the for my daytime devotionals, and huh, I think that might be it right now, actually.
Okay. Okay. And what songs are on your playlist?
Oh, you are asking me a very powerful question, and you know that.
I do. Why do you think I did it? There's always a method to the
uh,
Mirabot
so,
madness.
so my favorite song that is on replay on my playlist right now is a song by Bailey Zimmerman that is called "Where It Ends," and that's specific to some personal stuff I've gone through recently. But it's is such an appropriate and solid reminder of making sure that I am being true to myself.
I love that. And I'm gonna go listen to it after today because it
Okay.
sounds like it's amazing. Okay, last rapid fire question. What are you most grateful for in this moment right now?
I am most grateful for my friends, quite honestly. I've been through various crises in my life. And I would not be where I am today without them. And it varies. It goes back to that personal board, but in a kind of a different level. And I've always taught my girls, who are your top five? Who are the people that you're going to go to if you need somebody, right? And those top five are going to change as you grow up, as you take on a new job, because you're going to need people for different reasons in your life. And you need to rely on them. And having raised the girls on my own, the whole "it takes a village" is definitely a 100% true statement. And having that support system to rely on, fall back on, call when one of the girls needed a ride or there was water coming in the basement, whatever the situation was. um, I would be um, I would be remiss if I did not say that is what I'm most grateful for right now.
It's amazing. Okay, so people want to book you for a speaking engagement or get in touch with you. How do people do that?
Yeah, so probably the best way is to look me up on LinkedIn. It's Tammy Klotz, Klotz, and you can get in contact me there. Send a connection request, put a request in a message, and we can take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, Tammy's amazing. I can't say enough about you. So thank you so much for spending your precious currency of time here with us on Hidden Human. And thank you to our audience for listening. It's our intention on Hidden Human to inspire you to go out and have authentic conversations to deepen the connections in your life. Thank you so much and make it a great day.